CJ, you have no freaking clue what we're talking about, huh?
I don't know what we're doing, Ben. I don't know why you've called me into your office here. I feel like I'm going to get fired, or it's like bring your CFO to work day.
No, you actually asked me what sort of advice have we talked about if you're working with like maybe a difficult founder or a difficult CFO.
Yeah.
I want to propose a scenario for you. We're back to January 2007. You are the CFO of the most successful software company in the world. Your CEO just went on camera and publicly dismissed a competitor's new product. He called it overpriced. He said it had no keyboard. He said it would never get significant market share. Your data is telling you a different story. Mobile adoption is accelerating. Your competitor's hardware margins are strong. Consumer electronics is moving fast. Do you go into his office?
I have a hunch of what company it is because the CEO is larger than life, if I'm guessing who this company is correctly.
This guy might have some current aspirations of something bigger right now for you basketball fans.
This is a common thing with executive presence. It's called the triangle of doom, right? If you're the CFO, you actually have the weakest spot on the triangle. This is something that Rick Smith, former guest, taught me. And the other 2 points of the triangle are the CEO and the board. And the board and CEO have conversations all the time that you're not privy to. You kind of have 2 bosses in a way, right? The CEO is your boss on paper, but you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders and to your board. And you also don't want to go above either one and offend them. So whenever there's a scenario like this, I try to say, is there something I don't know? And are there other incentives from others involved?
That CEO was Steve Ballmer. Company was Microsoft.
That is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
The product was the iPhone, and within 5 years, it was the most profitable consumer product ever made. Microsoft's mobile business was essentially over. They eventually wrote off, I think, $7.6 billion on their Nokia acquisition and exited the market entirely.
I forgot that Microsoft tried to launch a phone. Complete tangent. Do you remember when ESPN launched a phone?
ESPN launched a phone?
I don't know if it sent you text, but you could check the scores of sports games. So it was like a crappier version of the ESPN app. And I think the phone only lasted like 6 months.
$300 for the phone itself, and between $65 and $225 per month for content. Steve Jobs called it the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard.
But back to your question, I've actually been in the room more often where I've said something and maybe even regretted it, because I felt like I couldn't keep it inside of me. I just had to call a spade a spade. And in many ways, I think the CFO is looked at as the consigliere of the CEO. It's their truth teller. You do, I think, get a pass to call a baby ugly or a product ugly if you have to, because you're making the resource allocations that are attached to it. I've definitely been in scenarios where I've spoken up and been very happy I did. And a couple scenarios come to mind around, I think, hiring decisions, where I said to the CEO, I think that was a dumb choice. And then it's pretty awkward after. Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
You did this interview with Alex Immerman, who is the general partner at A16Z. This is in June of 2025. And he was talking about his favorite interview question for a CFO candidate. So let's roll the clip.
My personal favorite is, tell me about a time you disagreed strongly with a CEO and what happened. So a great CFO is not just a numbers person, but a strategic counterweight. We were talking about the strategic mind earlier, and this question is important for assessing that. One, do you have a backbone? Do you have the chutzpah to stand up in a difficult situation? By the way, if your example is not a difficult situation, you probably don't have a backbone. Do you have the communication skills to thoughtfully disagree? Do you have the respect and trust of the CEO? What I'm trying to glean is whether the candidate is a pushover, and the CEO hopefully does not want to bring on a pushover.
I disagree with my haircut at the time.
I was going to say, I'm glad you switched barbers. I'm glad you said that first.
I remember this discussion with Alex because it validated a lot of the thinking that I had around the CFO's role, not just as a fiduciary, but as the person who can call a strike and call a ball and be honest with everybody there. And the CFO is supposed to have the company's best interests in mind, not their departments. And at times you not only have to tell the CEO something that they don't want to hear, but your peers throughout the C-suite. So this is one of my favorite conversations, I think, just on the dynamics between the CEO and CFO.
So this like interview question, tell me about a time that you disagreed strongly with the CEO and what happened. Is there a version of that answer that may sound good in an interview, but is actually a red flag?
Yeah, I think it would just be around something weak around budgeting. Like the CEO wanted to go and spend on a big conference. And I said, that doesn't sound like money well spent. Okay, that's table stakes. You should just be able to tell them like, there's no ROI on that. The more complicated things are, like I said, around hiring decisions in the C-suite. It's around launching a go-to-market and product in a new country and having to really expand your workforce there. It could be around an acquisition. I think a lot of these questions often come up around something new coming to the market or you potentially being purchased by another company. CEOs only got into that position, especially founder CEOs, because they've said, damn the torpedo so many times and taken these crazy risks that nobody else believed in. So in many ways, they're probably looking at you as a CFO like, I've outperformed what the market said I could do 10 times in a row, and you're going to tell me that this isn't going to work? No, you don't get how I got here. That's something that I think is unsaid, that is hard as the CFO to hold them back and be that counterweight when this person has done something, created something so incredible when the odds many times were not in their favor.
One of my favorite examples of just that like sort of dreamer and like realist dynamic is the Disney company history and how when they first started out, Walt was the dreamer. He was the guy that was like had all the ideas. His brother Roy, I guess he was like sort of the COO.
I don't think Roy gets enough credit for executing on Walt's vision in the sense that a CFO or COO many times has to continue to lay track out in front of the CEO, which can be hard, right? Because you have to find a way to coordinate resources to execute on that vision.
There's a documentary that's about that Disney Renaissance in like the 80s. You know, they were almost taken over in like a hostile takeover type thing. And it was like when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells came in. Michael Eisner was the sort of new Disney type, like kind of dreamer, but he had Frank Wells. And it was when Frank Wells tragically passed away that like things kind of went off the rails a little bit.
That steady hand, really.
Yeah. You had sort of a response to this.
I don't remember my response.
I want to see what you say here.
I think in a lot of ways, the best CFOs are liked even when they make non-likable decisions. And what I'm trying to say, I think, is like you're often put in these positions that are inherently disagreeable. But if you have the trust of your peers to make that call and they're like, I didn't like the outcome of that decision or exactly like where your mind was at, like with going international, but like I respect where you're coming from and I appreciate you pushing back. Like that means a lot.
You still feel the same exact way? Is it worth even going deep on that?
Yes. And I've come to appreciate the ability of a CFO to be disagreeable more and more as I've talked to an increasing number of podcast guests. It's against your human nature to not have people like you. Like we started off in tribes, right? Where if you weren't liked, you get pushed out and you probably die. Get put in these positions where you have to fight against that human nature to be liked by others around you. And the ability to just lock in and give the right answer for the company at the time, maybe not for the people around you in terms of how they see the business and world in that moment, makes you such a better exec, and I really respect it.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Anrok, the sales tax platform behind companies like Anthropic, Notion, and Vanta. Here's a fun way to totally ruin a Tuesday. Open a letter from a state you've never set foot in, telling you that you owe back taxes you didn't know existed. Happened to me, because the rules never stop moving. States are now racing to tax AI, digital ads, streaming, really anything new, and they're doing it faster than a spreadsheet can keep up. Anrok handles all of it. One platform that watches your exposure everywhere, automates compliance, and flags risk before it turns into that nasty gram. That's why thousands of finance leaders trust Anrok to stay ahead. Talk to an Anrok sales tax expert for a personalized exposure estimate at anrok.com/RTN. That is ANROK.com/RTN. Here's a growth tax that nobody talks about. Every new pricing model you ship creates a nightmare for your finance team. Usage-based pricing? Now you're tracking usage against commitments. Product bundles? Now you're untangling what to recognize and when for every line item. Mid-cycle upgrades? Good luck manually reallocating revenue. The pricing strategies that drive growth are the same ones that break your finance process. RightRev turns that irony into a competitive advantage. Your product team can ship new pricing without asking finance for permission, and your sales team can close deals without worrying about downstream chaos. But I've seen too many companies where sales are celebrating a huge quarter while finance is still trying to figure out how to recognize half of it. It's actually me. So here's a good place to start. RightRev built a free tool at calculator.rightrev.com. It scores your RevRec process, shows what's exposing you to risk, and tells you exactly where to focus before it bites you in the rear. Probably explains why your last close took so long. Check it out at calculator.rightrev.com. All right, without the Boston accent, calculator.rightrev.com. Hey, founders and finance folks, you know how early on everything is fast and scrappy, and then suddenly equity gets messy? Spreadsheets break, grant docs pile up, lawyers are sending new forms and collecting fees. It all shows up right about when you're already swamped. Well, if managing your cap table feels like one more frustrating thing on a very long to-do list, you need to know about Pulley. Pulley makes equity management simple and stress-free. You can issue options, model dilution, complete 409As, and more, all in one place with support from real experts when you need it. So if you're raising, hiring, or scaling, Pulley keeps your cap table clean so you can stay focused on building, not wrangling spreadsheets. Learn more, request a demo at pulley.com/mostlymetrics. That is pulley.com/mostlymetrics.
So this next clip is actually from Curt from Clio. He's still the CFO of Clio. This clip was from December of 2024. He talks a little bit about maybe not the complete flip side of what we've been talking about here, but he says something here that I think you'll really appreciate. I want to let him say it. I don't want to spoil it for you.
Are there any strategies for working with founders and empowering them from the CFO seat?
Yeah, there's a couple. One is take your ego and put it in the bottom drawer and shut it hard. And really listen and build trust. I found that founders are an incredible source of information, and they have very compelling perspectives on business decision-making, whether it's compensation to new products. But you got to find a way to get it out. And you've got to ask the right set of questions. And it's got to be Q&A based and conversation based, because the best way I've found is founders have almost an allergic reaction to the answer no. Like, so, take a conversation. You're saying like, no, you shouldn't do it that way, like as a CFO. Okay, well, that just set off an alarm bell, and that ends up, creating all kinds of friction as you continue to go through the conversation with the founder, as opposed to help me understand. Let's get to the bottom. What are you really trying to do? What are you trying to do? Have you thought about maybe approaching it from this perspective because it would, add this, this, and this? Or is that an issue? You do have to really think about how you're going to approach these issues, because the founder has to see you as an ally and has to trust you implicitly. And 3 is, you're not in this role, especially with founders, to take the limelight. You're here to propel. I talk about it as at service leadership. Like, you're at the service of the founder. You're at the service of the executive. Like, the finance leader is to elevate everybody in the company to make better decisions, to achieve what they need to with the resources that we have, and similarly with the board. And so you've got to kind of have that mindset with founders. And I can tell you, just avoid a lot of challenges if you adopt that.
Take that ego, CJ, put it in the bottom drawer. What do you think?
It's really hard to do, especially when you're around CEOs with this sphere of influence and the energy that's dynamic and contagious, to always remember that you're just part of the supporting cast to execute on that vision. Like we said before, founders are visionary in the sense of knowing where they want to push the company and where they want to go and what they want the end goal to be. What they may lack, and where a CFO can help a lot, is the intermediary steps to do it. They understand that they want to be number one in the market with this many products by this date, but how do you bridge the gap in between? The CFOs can be tactical in helping to get there. I think Steve Jobs almost never asked people or customers like what they wanted in a lot of ways. And the same thing with Henry Ford. He said people would have just asked for faster horses. And so a lot of times it's instead of saying no to a founder, it's repivoting by way of using questions to better understand what the motivations are and where they're trying to go in the end. Maybe that is you have to create a car instead of using a horse to ride to their destination.
There seems like there's like an inherent tension in this advice, because earlier we were talking about like have some chutzpah, have some backbone, but now Curt is talking about taking a back seat, keeping that ego, in the bottom drawer.
I think you have to have that backbone when you're faced with a one-way door decision versus a two-way door decision, right? Like you have to stand up and let your opinion be heard and say, I think that's a good idea or a bad idea. But what I think he's saying here is more in the positive framing of the CEO wants to drive the business to a positive business outcome. How do you help get there? Put your ego away. You are the Robin to the Batman. How do you help execute upon that? So I think they're both true under different circumstances.
Is it a matter of like uncovering that second door?
This is going to come across like a generalization. It's definitely not true in every scenario. I find a lot of CEOs think in terms of binaries of like, we're going to do this and get to this point, and it's like black and white in terms of like where they want to go with things. There are often shades of gray that get uncovered along the way, or there are different paths you can take to achieve similar outcomes. So to your point, Ben, I think it is finding those different variations by way of asking questions of what we're trying to achieve.
So next I want to pivot to a clip where you're talking to Daniel Kang. And at the time, it was December of 2024. He was the VP of Finance at Mercury. Now he's the CFO of Mercury. So definitely some valuable information for folks that maybe aren't in the C-suite yet. This is coming from a guy that said this at the time, and he finds himself in the CFO seat now.
I do think that finance has a bigger voice sometimes in other groups, though. And this is, just it happens that way. I'm not saying it's fair, but because you're helping the CEO a lot of times with that initial tops down cut, or you're doing the long range plan, you can't have your fingerprints on the org. Now, I'm not saying that like it should be viewed as a financial exercise per se, but you do have like you said, a voice at the table of shaping it.
The way that finance can best plug in, I actually don't like this moniker of finance has a seat at the table because you control the purse strings. I think that's actually like the last type of hard power that you want to exercise to be effective in your job. You want to be effective in your job because you're being a thought partner and like being able to hopefully allocate resources in partnership, assuming that everyone has the right intentions to buy and think about the company, not like their own individual kingdom building, which does happen, obviously.
That's so well said. Like if people are only listening to you because you can say yes or no because you have money, it's like, do they really respect you?
For sure.
I say that like I know that I'm being a good partner when like my CMO or CRO will come to me with like an idea that's not fully baked yet, right? But they want to bounce it off me, and it's not because it means I've broken through them thinking that I'm there just to like judge something as like a binary investment decision. Like they see me as a thought partner. Like, I can bring them like this half-baked idea and we can jam on this to see if it has legs.
I think the best marker of a successful finance team is when you do see those type of cross-functional pools for collaboration. I think that's a much bigger marker than like forecast accuracy or some of the silly things that finance teams try to say, okay,
Ben, these clips are such a throwback. Have you realized that the background behind me has changed 3 times from the same seat in the same room?
I know. Let this be proof that you're not actually an AI guy. You just got a little bit more budget. So don't use the purse strings as your seat at the table, I think is the summary of what Daniel's talking about there.
I've also heard the opposite take here too. It was from Sonoe Torero, CFO and COO now of Envoy. He basically said, it's funny, finance has this power to also make certain problems go away with money. And he wasn't saying bribe people. He was saying money sometimes can cause problems and you can use that with discretion. Let's say you have someone who gets paid $200,000 a year and they're being blocked from 50% of the productivity because of a $10,000 problem. Use your magic wand and make that go away with $10,000 worth of spend. However, to Daniel Kang's point, that shouldn't be the only reason they're coming to you for the money. They should be coming to you for helping to think through whatever issue it is that they have. And money is one of the arrows you have. It's not the end all be all. They should be coming to you because they think of you as someone who can clearly think through a scenario that involves resource allocation, it involves pricing, it involves whatever it may be. and they trust your opinion on it. When I say trust your opinion, it means they're coming to you because they don't think they're going to be judged, right? Because the CFO does sit in this funny seat where they could go to the CEO and say like, hey, I don't think CMO is pulling their weight or doing a great job based on the numbers I have. They also think that you're going to jam out with them and give more back than what they gave to you in terms of, hey, can you think through this?
It seems like there's rarely a scenario where you're going to be like, sorry, man, just don't have it in the budget.
The bad CFOs and bad finance professionals will just stop at, no, can't do it, red light, we don't have money in the budget. There's always conversation that should be had around what is the best risk-adjusted return on the capital we have. And also it goes back to what we were saying with the CEO before. What are we even trying to achieve with this? Because it may not even be that we don't have the money. It just may be we don't have the right people working on the right stuff. And it's changing the mix of people and software and now tokens.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
I got news for you. The ERP category is finally getting disrupted. And if you haven't heard of Rillet yet, please pay attention. It's the AI native ERP built specifically to replace NetSuite, and it's already won over hundreds of finance teams. Their mission is to make the zero-day close a reality, and they're actually doing it. We're talking teams closing the books at 1:35 p.m. on the first day of the month. Companies like Windsurf, Mercor, and hundreds of others run their entire finance stack on Rillet. Revenue recognition, close management, multi-entity, native Stripe and Salesforce integrations, woo! Everything a scaling company needs. They've got 50 stars on G2. They're backed by A16Z and Sequoia, heard of them, and CPA-led implementations that get you live in 45 days. That is simply unheard of in the ERP space. If your books aren't running as fast as your business, check out Rillet. Book a demo at rillet.com/CJ. That is RILLET.com/CJ. That's me. Everyone in finance is adopting AI right now. There's a problem because there are a dozen disconnected tools. You got one for revenue, one for AP, one for close, and each one of these needs training and documentation. And the expertise to run them lives in your team's heads, not your systems. Maximor takes the opposite approach. One autonomous finance platform for the whole operation. Order to cash, procure to pay, the close, cash management, reporting, running on a single unified finance context that pulls from your ERP, billing, banks, even email and Slack. Maximor runs on self-learning agents that learn how your team already works. No prompts to write, no workflows to build, nothing to document. Every output is audit ready, and when a call needs human judgment, it escalates for review. Because the agents optimize, not just execute. And your KPIs improve. I'm talking about DSO, working capital, cash conversion. In fact, one PE-backed customer cut their close in half. Their audit findings from 7 to 0, back office costs down 70%. And in 6 months, no ERP rip and replace. You pay only for real outcomes, not seats. See it at maximor.ai. That is maximor.ai. The CFO role has evolved faster than the tools built to support it. Most finance teams are still running infrastructure designed for a job that no longer exists. The reporting, the reconciling, the close that bleeds into the next month or quarter. That's not finance, that's overhead with a really crappy title. And the cost isn't just your time, it's everything your best people aren't doing while they're buried in it. Agentic finance shouldn't multiply your output, it should eliminate the work that was never worth doing in the first place. And that's why I run mostly media on Brex, an intelligent finance platform with AI-powered agents that capture expenses automatically, enforce policy before the spend happens, and close your books in minutes instead of weeks. 35,000 companies like OpenAI, Coinbase, Anthropic, and DoorDash already run on Brex. It's time to get Brex AF. Learn more at brex.com/metrics.
So next up, we've got a clip from Ante. At the time, he was the CFO of Paycor. This was in June of 2024. Now he's the SVP and Managing Director at Paychex. Paycor was acquired in April of 2025. So a little bit of growth for him. I know you've gone through going public, and you've gone through a company being acquired as well, correct?
I have not gone through the process of going public. We thought we were going public, just like every other company during the ZERP era, but I've gone through the process of being acquired. And if you're acquired, the CFO and the chief legal officer, and usually the head of HR are the first three out the door.
If you're acquired and you are the CFO of a company and you go to that next company, you're probably not going to get that same title. Maybe even like it may appear on paper like a demotion of sorts, right?
Well, usually they don't keep you around because they already have a CFO, and ostensibly it's a bigger company if they're acquiring you. There are a couple scenarios, I think, where like the minnow swallows the whale. One example that I can think of is Matt Hudson. Coda was acquired by Grammarly, much bigger company, and the CEO of Coda became the CEO of Grammarly, and the CFO of Coda became the CFO of Grammarly, which was neat to see.
Let's let Adam rip here.
Adam, do you think finance people pigeonhole themselves into narrow roles? Are there examples of like jumping into places that you didn't belong in your career that actually paid off?
I think finance people do that in spades. They're so good at it. Finance people, accounting people, people with that background. I don't know if it's because it's just where they're comfortable is, staying in numbers and staying in the financials, or if they don't realize the opportunity that they have to really take things to the next level. But I do see, folks sort of shrink away from the opportunity to like really press into the business and show up in places that, maybe they don't have any right to be, but there's an opportunity. And I think it's cool. Like folks always want a seat at the table. And when I hear people say like, I want a seat at the table, or they're not giving me the seat at the table, I think you have to like look at yourself and say like, well, first, are you adding value to these conversations? Because when you're adding value and you're killing the things that you're doing, people want you to be sitting at their table. And then when you get to the table, then you're like, I have the right to sort of get into anything I want. And you got to be respectful, of course. You don't want to just like, you're a finance person, by the way. You haven't sold software yet. But, when you can step into some of those areas, you can add a different perspective. And I think that's what's really valuable is when you can come with a different perspective, then everybody can make better decisions. And I've been sort of lucky enough to get into those opportunities, quite a few times in my career.
I feel like there's something that's like uncomfortably honest about this take, that is they're not giving me a seat at the table almost always this self-diagnosis. Does it come from like reflection inwards?
Something super empowering that Sruthi Lanka, CFO of Public, told me is that the CFO has the right to sit in on any meeting within the company, right? It's all within your purview. Do not feel restricted. You do not have the right to speak up and give advice on stuff you don't know, but you do have a right to be at the table and be at least a listener to the conversation for your awareness. Made me feel pretty good around not pigeonholing myself. And what Adam gets at here is you earn your way into conversations outside of the typical finance realm by proving value, right? And it also links to what Dan Kang said around being a good business partner, thinking more broadly about the departmental specific problems that someone's trying to solve and using whatever in your arsenal to help them achieve that.
You've started a company. It's your first 90 days at the company. What does adding that value actually look like in, let's say, the first 90 days when you may not have earned that trust yet?
It's coming in with a fresh set of ears and eyes to an org that has been doing stuff in a certain way because inertia is hard to move. Hey, how are we paying sales reps here? Walk me through it. And then you're looking around like, well, why do we do it that way? Oh, because so-and-so used to work here and we did that. And so much of it is just listening, then reflecting back what you heard. It's funny, even sometimes when you say something to a sales leader or CMO, you're just stating what your observations are. Because those are usually your closest thought partners, right? As a CFO, outside of the CEO, they're like, oh, and just hearing that can make them think about it differently. You're not even giving suggestions, right? You're just reflecting back what you're hearing. And so I think there's a lot of value, not just for CFOs, but anybody coming into an org in terms of absorbing what's going on and then trying to figure out why things are done a certain way. Then I think you can start to make suggestions on how you might change things.
Is there a version of this where like the CFO is genuinely being excluded and it's just not their fault?
It's cultural at that point. I think it's because it's not a data-driven organization, or they think that the CFO is reactive and just in this back room, they're going to write down what the results were after the fact, right?
So next up, we have a clip from David Laptor. He's the CFO of Dashlane. I believe he's like a 5-time CFO.
He's going to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame for CFO someday.
And I've taught my kids that lesson. Like that's something that stays with me. Just listen. You don't have to speak every time a question is asked. You don't need to participate in every discussion. Listen, observe, think, speak when it's really going to be impactful, right? Now, on the flip side, I said speak up. And speak up is about the mistakes I made at fab.com, for example. But I think we all make those mistakes, which is,
especially like, let's say as a high functioning executive team, if there's something that's being said or contemplated, especially before a decision is made, speak up if you disagree. Ideally have data-driven, data-informed reasons for it. Don't sit back and say, well, I'm going to be the minority speaking against it, or I'm going to be the only naysayer. No. Say your piece. You don't want to get to a point where you've made mistakes and then go over and over it in your head, asking yourself, what if I had spoken louder?
For the context of listeners, fab.com was one of the highest funded, kind of a marketplace for buying goods around the .com boom. Like many other companies, did not have the best ending. They were burning an insane amount of money to keep the company going in comparison to the revenue it was bringing in. I believe he's reflecting on are the decisions they made around hiring people and the product roadmap. I've always spoken up about the hiring stuff, but if you're working with a technical leader, it can be daunting to question some of their decisions around the roadmap because you're not technical. David's approach is he's bringing data to the conversation when it is something that may be outside the purview of a CFO, just to arm people with the correct information to make those decisions, even if you're not the person to make them. So speaking up, Ben, I don't think always means speaking up to say I don't agree with something. Sometimes speaking up can be to provide context and numbers that would better serve the leaders around you.
We'll get back to the Microsoft example in a second, but kind of going back to that, like, how do you build that kind of culture where the CFO is saying something like, I think we're wrong about this, I think this was a mistake, is welcomed rather than punished?
Having forums to share data and information, because nobody likes to have just thrown on their desk, this is wrong, this is bad, you made a bad choice. It should never come to that point. It should be a series of conversations around data and the context in your market scenario, especially as it relates to your competitors, and then the macro of where you can receive funding. That way, it's not just dropping this, hey, you did a bad job on somebody's desk. You have to have a culture where these discussions have a forum. Maybe that's a Monday exec meeting call. Maybe it's a series of 5 key data points that everybody agrees are the most important to operate the business, and they're sent out every Tuesday at a certain time, and they're very accessible to people.
So let's bring it back to Curt from Clio now. He's got a little bit of a full circle for us.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes CFOs can make. I think most of us get it in the private world and in the venture-backed world that that's the way things operate, but it's really important that you don't come in as a know-it-all and, full of your own self-ego and believe that you have all the answers, because there's some things that you just may not know that the founder wants to drive towards, or there may be conversations going on between a board member and the founder that you're just not a part of. And so, approach everything with that growth mindset and to get your issues heard. Otherwise, if you come in and say, look, you got 10 problems, buddy, and there's big issues on the horizon, like 99% of founders will just shut down on that.
Yeah.
And we're left alone.
Right.
To solve those problems.
You never want to fail alone either.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. I didn't know that this clip was going to be in here. When I started, the top of the podcast was talking about the triangle and you being in the weakest position as a CFO.
The answer isn't always to push back, and it isn't to never push back. So how do you know when you've kind of earned that right to push back?
Before you push back, you have to seek to understand. That's what Curt is getting at here. It's the first principles of why are they trying to do this thing, right? I think you also gain trust from showing somebody that you have a genuine interest in their business. Also, I hate that we can't use the word genuine or genuinely anymore because of ChatGPT. People think that you're reading off a script, which I'm not. But that is how you earn trust, through curiosity that shows people that you're invested in their business and you seek to understand.
The failure to speak up, maybe it initially comes from fear, but it seems like it's more nuanced than that.
I think it's the social dynamic part of not wanting to call somebody's metric ugly. I've written about this before too. It was called Beware of All Green Dashboards, which I think is a problem that CFOs will get into, where they're measuring something they know intuitively has lost its connection to the ground truth of the business, but they continue to do so because the metric was invented by somebody a while ago and they did things a certain way, but they continue to cite this all green dashboard because they don't insult anyone. It goes back to the tribal tendency of wanting to be accepted. And if you challenge something, people inherently tie it back to their personal worth oh, am I bad at my job? And so I think that's what a lot of us avoid. You get around that by having that culture where you're constantly discussing things. And that can't be a check the box exercise either. It has to be a scenario where people lay the business on the table for others to understand.
Before we started recording, we were talking about how we report metrics, and I felt comfortable coming to you about, like, there was this just sort of thing that was going on that we couldn't really trust. I understand this may reflect on myself, but I just want to make sure that you have all the information and hopefully we're on the same page as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, like, there's so many analogs to dealing with somebody who's maybe from the marketing team showing a pipeline number and it's 2.5x instead of 3x and they measured it wrong, or the investment you put in, those are the right numbers but didn't pan out well. As the CFO, not great if you jump down their throat and just yell at them. That doesn't actually solve anything. In fact, what you're doing is you're cutting off your stream of information to make future decisions. So it may make you feel emotionally better in the moment to yell at somebody, but what you're actually doing is harming downstream your ability to make better decisions, because that person is not going to come to you anymore, right? They're going to avoid it at all costs.
Let's come full circle completely here. We started this episode out, Steve Ballmer, he was talking about the iPhone, and the question that was hanging over everything that we've talked about today is whether anyone in that building could have said the hard thing and actually have been heard. So we know now what Curt would say about keeping ego in the bottom drawer. We know what David said, the consequences of staying silent. We know what Alex Immerman looks for in a CFO candidate when he asks about the time they disagreed with the CEO. We know what Ante thinks about the seat at the table being earned, not assigned. Let's flash back. It's January 2007. You, CJ, you are the CFO of Microsoft. Ballmer just went on camera and he laughed at the iPhone. You know what you know. You've got the relationship. You've earned that trust. You put your ego in the bottom drawer. What do you walk into his office and say?
I would say, Steve, this isn't an issue of what anybody said today. We have an issue that 6 months ago, we were not discussing the right data to even know where we stood in the market to make a claim like that. It's not a problem of what was done today. It's how did we arrive at this point where nobody felt comfortable saying this is the current traction we have with this product. This is the investment we've made in the product roadmap. And these are the metrics that we use to judge success. It's less an indictment on that moment in time and what was said, and more an indictment on the culture that was created to live in that warped view of what good performance looks like.
And he's just screaming, developers, developers, developers.
Sweating profusely on stage.
Developers, 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 developers.
I feel like you kind of have to throw the ESPN phone example at him of, like, look, they weren't wrong. They were just early.
You can be wrong and early, but it's better to have those conversations even earlier.
Any other parting thoughts before we wrap?
I love this, man. This was a lot of fun. It was a blast from the past too, just to watch how much the podcast has developed. Shout out to you and Steve for continually improving the quality of this. It's come a long way. And at the same time, the guest wisdom is evergreen. It's still so pertinent even in today's world. So much has changed, I think, in terms of how we produce the podcast, but it's just so valuable to look back on these lessons. So great job.
Thanks, man. And it's really cool seeing how pretty much every guest we talked about today, it wasn't cherry picked as far as what their status was currently as a CFO. Truly, every guest that we talked about is either still in the seat that they were when we talked to them, 18 months ago.
Or in a better seat.
Yeah, a better seat. So it's cool.
Run the Numbers is a mostly media production. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by Meg D'Alessandro. Show is executive produced by Ben Hillman. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog way too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses. LOL. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. It will take like 2 seconds and our algorithm overlords love it. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day. Peace.